With Black Clover finally releasing next week on Tuesday, which is the 25th of May, at least in some parts of the world, I think it's time that we should finally talk about some characters. Because especially if you're free to play and you cannot get your hands on every single SSR character, I want to tell you some SR characters which are still really good and that can help you progress through the game. The first character we'll be talking about is Mimosa, because she's a unit everyone gets for free because of pre-registration, and she'll fill in the slot of healer. Her first skill applies recovery to a friendly target with the lowest health, restoring 5% of their health for 2 turns. Her second skill is also a single target and has a 50% chance to apply healing reduction level 2 to all enemies for 2 turns. It also applies recovery to herself, as well as to the teammate with the lowest HP, restoring 45% of their health. The passive allows her second skill to apply recovery to all teammates, which then restores HP equal to 30% of Mimosa's magic attack. Her ultimate is an AoE heal, which recovers 30% of everyone's HP, and if they already have full HP, they get a barret equal to 55% of their HP for 2 turns. We already know that she does have a combined attack with Noelle, but we don't know what it does yet, so I'm just talking about the normal combined attack skill, which has a 20% chance to apply 30% lifesteal to the combo partner, and it also applies heal increase level 1 to that unit for 2 turns. In general, Mimosa is a really good healer that does a great job at keeping your units alive, and even though that technically is a stronger healer with the SSR Mimosa version, she is a seasonal unit. That means there's only a 0.06% chance to even pull her. And while it is certainly possible that you might pull her, don't take it for granted that you will pull her. Most people are probably better off just settling for the SR Mimosa instead of hoping for something that has a low chance to pull as the seasonal units. Next up we have Noelle, a fan favorite usually, but here we already know that some of her skills have been changed because of the livestream that was happening at the end of February. Her first skill is no longer here, it is still single target, but it now gives a defense buff to the lowest HP unit on the team. Her other skills are basically the same except for the second skill. We don't know if it has been changed, if it hasn't been. Her second skill has a 75% chance to apply taunt to all enemy targets for 1 turn, and she goes into a defense stance for 1 turn. Her ultimate gives a barrier equal to 25% of max HP to a friendly target for 2 turns. Since it is an AoE ult, it applies to all team units, and it applies a death increase level 3 for 2 turns. Again, here she does have a combo attack with Mimosa, but we don't know what it does. Her combo skill gives her combo partner a 20% chance to stun with attacks and gives them a level 1 defense penetration buff for 1 turn. Her passive applies a 10% barrier to all friendly units with HP below 20% for 2 turns upon using a skill on them, and the combined attack doesn't count for that. Her job is to also keep the team alive. She doesn't heal anymore, but she does give defense, which lowers the damage everyone gets. She gives everyone barriers. It's still pretty good. And unlike other units on this list, she does not have an SSR version, meaning that if you want to use Noelle because she's your favorite character, you'll have to settle with the SR version for now. Not to mention that you also get it for free just by playing through the story. Next up we have Asta. He takes the role of tank and is the first unit we get along with Yuno when we are starting the game. His passive is that he just gains 10% damage reduction. His first skill removes a maximum of 2 debuffs, gives himself weapon enhancement level 1, which is just damage increased by 10%, and then attacks all the enemies. And for every buff that he removed, he gains 5% attack for 2 turns, which means he can get a maximum of 10% attack from that skill alone. The second skill is an AoE attack, which gives himself weapon enhancement level 2 and then attacks the enemy. Again, weapon enhancement level 2 is just 20% damage increase. His ultimate is also AoE damage, which removes all buffs from the enemy targets. He gives himself weapon enhancement level 3, which is 30% damage increase, and then attacks all the enemies. For his combined attack, he does have a special attack with Yuno, which always crits and removes barrier and invulnerability from enemy targets before they hit. And his normal combined skill gives himself the invulnerability buff for 1 turn, taunts the enemy target if they aren't already taunted, and stuns some enemies if they do not have an active taunt. Since he is supposed to be tanking, I think his normal combined attack is better. Obviously, the combined attack with Yuno hitting those crits can be pretty strong, but personally, I would not be running that combo attack, just his usual one. Next up, we have Yuno, and personally, I think he is the strongest SR unit in the game. He's been hard carrying me in the beta through PvP, PvE, boss fights, and so on. This is a screenshot of the highest damage I've been able to output during the beta. I did not record the match. It was a random PvP match I was doing, and I did not expect him to hit this hard, but he did, and it was insane. Technically, there's one other unit which could be considered the strongest, but I'll talk about him after this. His passive is that he applies 5% magic attack increase for 2 turns after hitting a crit, which is pretty good because Yuno is a crit unit after all. His first skill is a single target, which deals additional 100% damage upon defeating an enemy or hitting a successful crit, meaning that if you crit or kill a target, you will do an attack on every other unit as well, which does the same damage as the first attack. And if the enemy does have a debuff, you apply crit chance increase level 1 to yourself before attacking the enemy, meaning you have an even higher chance of triggering that additional attack even if you don't kill the enemy or don't have that high of a crit chance. The first skill is also your main damage skill. You don't use the other two as much, but there are instances in which you can use them. The second skill is an AoE damage skill, which has a 75% chance to apply Incapacitate to enemies, which stops the enemy from attacking, and it has a 50% chance to stun the enemy if they already are incapacitated. Like I said, usually you want to just attack with the first skill, but if you can stun the enemies because you have a different unit which already applied Incapacitate, it can be pretty useful. And your ultimate is also an AoE damage skill which applies defense penetration level 3 and then attacks the enemy. It also applies defense reduction to the enemies for 2 turns. Again, here you have the combo skill with Asta, which does make more sense to use on Yuno because he does have more crit damage usually. But there are usually other units which are more useful because they buff Yuno. And his normal combined skill applies defense reduction level 1 to enemy for 2 turns. And it has a 50% chance to apply 25% stamina reduction to an enemy target, meaning the turn will be delayed. Again, in my opinion, the strongest SR unit, definitely one I will be building personally. Very good for PvE, PvP, bosses, and so on. Technically, there is the seasonal Yuno. Again, 0.06% chance to pull him, but he technically does have the higher damage potential. If you pull him though, definitely use him in PvP. I think he'll do better there than the SR Yuno. But for farming, I personally think the SR Yuno is still unbeatable. And lastly, for this video, we have 2 honorable mentions. The first one is Lotus. He was a SR unit during the beta, but has already been upgraded to an SSR. This man was nasty. If they didn't change any of his skills, he will be the #1 PvP unit for the toxic crowd control team, because this is disgusting. He increases his own stamina and completely deletes the stamina of his enemies and has a 75% chance to incapacitate everyone for 3 turns. This is disgusting. And if he didn't change, if they didn't change anything on him except for his rarity, this will be the #1 PvP unit, let me tell you. This was disgusting. And the next one is Heath. Again, only honorable mention because it was really strong, and a lot of people have been complaining during the beta about it. It is more than likely that he has already been hard nerfed. But nonetheless, I want to tell you what he did. You can only describe it as unfair. First skill was a single target which had a 40% chance to freeze an enemy target for 1 turn after every attack, and it plays a level 1 defense penetration and then attacks the enemy target if they have an active freeze, which means he basically attacked twice, I think. The second skill, also a single target damage skill, had a 75% chance to apply reduced speed level 2 to an enemy for 3 turns, and a 75% chance to freeze an enemy target for 1 turn, and granted himself speed increase level 2 for 3 turns. His ultimate had a 75% chance to freeze for 1 turn and was a guaranteed freeze if the target had more than 75% stamina. His combined skill was a single target damage skill which had a 60% chance to apply speed reduction to an enemy for 2 turns, and attacks were guaranteed crits if they were already frozen. His passive applied 5% speed reduction to an enemy target for 2 turns upon attacking them while they have an active freeze debuff. His skills were quite a bit overloaded, very heavy on the crowd control side. It wouldn't make sense if they didn't nerf him in some way or form. But other than that, those were all the most important units I think that you should be building. Of course, I've only been talking about the units we actually had during the beta. If there are other SR units, maybe even R units, which got added later into the game, which are worth to build, I'll be telling you about them, so don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.